even though I never worked on a government job, so I never was hired to meet a quota. And even though the equal rights advocate, I was not brought into the union under a lawsuit. It was sort of similar. Well, this is a very high profile issue. We better find some women to hire. And you know, out of that sensibility, I fed my family working with the tools for 20 years. So I think the issue of, unfortunately still today, there are only 2% women in construction. These are good paying jobs. There are women who work hard every day physically. They flip beds in hotels. They work on your campus. You see them every day. They're working physically hard. Yes, they would like to have high wages, pension, health care for the entire family. They would like these jobs. But it's the segregation in that industry still exists at such a level that they really just don't have the opportunity. The other aspect about their working condition is that without a critical mass of women on the job, if you're always the only woman, at 2%, it's 1 in 50. So you go, there's a construction strike right over there. There's probably not 50 workers there. And I don't think there's any women. There could be. When you show up on the job site, you are so visible that your working conditions can't be the same. If you have an issue of any sort, it's a personal problem. I mean, that hustler is all over the lunchroom is a personal problem. It's not harassment or a hostile work environment. Unfortunately, this is still the issue today. So I think it's important to look at this as a broad issue in terms of gender equity and what it means to be paid the same as a man. And we have to say white man, because if you look at the way the the pay discrimination or pay differentials still exist, that tends to be the highest standard. And with that, I'll speak more later.
We'll have an opportunity to take questions from the audience at the end of our presentation. But we'd like to move into sort of more discussion about why there is a persistent wage gap. And the next question is for Joan. Some people might say that women make less because it's their choice. They either decide they want to work part-time, they put raising families, having children and raising children before work, they take time off from the career track for whatever issues, caring for parents, and lower levels of educational attainment, professional ambition. These are all things that have been sort of given the explanation of why we have the wage gap. Well, this is why. It's really in a woman's control. So what would you say to that?
Well, I won't say what I'd say to that. It's 2 syllables, though. Anyway, yes. So the wage gap is figured on the median salary of women and men working year-round, full-time. That's the wage gap that's used for Equal Pay Day, and that's the 77 cents that I mentioned. You may have noticed that Hilda Solis mentioned 80%. There are calculations made that are not part of comparing since 1963 till now. We have the annual gap calculation, but many people use the weekly median salary over the past quarter, which basically takes into account the current jobs that people have, not what they had, a few years ago or whatever, because the annual one is always about a year or so old. So that's why it sounds better, a smaller gap, if you use the quarterly median salary for a weekly salary, over the last quarter. I believe that's as close as I can come to it. I have an explanation if anybody would like to read it later. So I put one of the brochures on your chair, and I'm not going to go through it all. You can read it, and it has a lot of graphs, difference by age, by education, by race, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to take time to go through all of that in detail. I did want to share with you, however, a book that is excellent. getting even. This is not about revenge. This is about salaries, why women don't get paid like men, and what to do about it. And we're going to be talking about some of the suggestions she has. There are many sections in here that I just want to mention to you. This is a book from 2005, and it has mostly cases and settlements over the 10 years before that. But it has, for 2002 alone, 4.5 pages like this of cases that went as far as getting settled or were taken to court. Excuse me just a second. Are you taking this on 5 minutes? Okay. So this is a book that's available at libraries, and it has a breakdown in different, this is just basic discrimination. There's also information about pregnancy discrimination. There's sections about harassment, sexual harassment, and general harassment, so on and so forth. So I didn't want to go through those in detail, but I have this here, and you can look at it later and see the extent of cases that actually got settled and they were able to track them down. Then there are all the problems that don't even get that far. Let's see. So we've dealt with the question of part-time work. That's irrelevant. That just means that a lot of women have even less than the full-time, real-round working women do. We also have the problem that Meg was mentioning as far as gender segregation in occupations. And we'll talk some more later about women's work and men's work and comparable worth and pay equity and paying according to the actual complexity of the job, as opposed to whether it's mostly men or mostly women who are in the job. Motherhood is another penalty. I mentioned earlier that the Wall Street Journal article was for childless workers, single, in urban settings. There's a chapter in this book on the mommy penalty and the daddy bonus, which is another interesting factor, just as as Jamie was saying about, we have to give him more because he has a family, because if she didn't. So I think that will be it for right now for me, and we'll talk some more later.
We've also been looking at the issue of the STEM careers, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we have our friends here from the San Jose chapter of AAUW, American Association of University Women. As we've been looking at this issue, they have a very good report out that is called Why So Few, which really explores the gaps for women in STEM careers. And it was really surprising to us as we looked at the research over the last year or so to know that there is no achievement gap at K through 12. Many of us still assume that girls underperform, girls don't do as well in math, science, in those courses. That's simply not true. We've not only closed the gap, some studies suggest that girls are outperforming boys K through 12. And so the question becomes, why then do we not see women in the STEM careers in the numbers that we should? And what the report suggests is that girls are leaving high school, entering college, and somehow from the beginning where they enter equally prepared, by the end of their college years, they're going into different careers. Those that make it and actually get a bachelor's in the STEM field and pursue masters are dropping off again. And the transition from the workplace, the transition from college to the workplace is another area. So when we looked at that, the AAU report suggests that there is a whole zone of environmental and social factors that contribute to that, including stereotypes, including gender bias, and sort of the climate of science and engineering departments. And in talking to women in our area colleges, including Stanford, San Jose State, they very eloquently speak about what it's like to be a woman in a male-dominated classroom. The treatment is different, sometimes hostile, and you very much, as Meg was suggesting, it is a very different experience that you have. So that's part of what the ongoing work for us locally is. And so, one of the things that one of our federal agencies, EEOC, has recognized that discrimination on the basis of caregiving is something that really affects women and limits their pay And they have an enforcement guidebook, and it's unlawful disparate treatment of workers with caregiving responsibilities, where they really talk about this issue. And we're very lucky because we've run across so many experts, and we have someone here with us today, Stephanie Bornstein, who is the Deputy Director of the Center for Work-Life Law at the University of California and the Hastings College of Law. She researches, writes, and teaches about gender discrimination and work-family issues. She was one of a small group of advocates that helped author and enact California's Paid Family Leave, which I had the privilege of using, the insurance program, and which was the nation's first comprehensive paid leave law. So Stephanie, if you could help us out by coming to the mic and helping us, talk about some of the reports that have come out on this issue and some of the work that you do.
Hi. Thanks for having me. So I work at the Center for Work-Life Law at UC Hastings, and we're a research and advocacy center that focuses on gender bias in the workplace and discrimination against people based on their family caregiving responsibilities, which is also known as caregiver discrimination, and also work-life fit. And I think what I was asked to highlight today was sort of the role that motherhood plays in the wage gap, and it's a really significant one. While I just sort of want to highlight for you that it's important to remember that discrimination against mothers is a really significant part of the pay gender wage gap. While all women are making 77 cents to the dollar, mothers actually make 67 cents to the dollar, and single mothers make 58 cents to the dollar. So exactly what Joan was saying about that Wall Street Journal study, the hugest part of the wage gap happens after women start having families, but 80% of women in the United States have children by the age of 44. So it's sort of one and the same. To look at it as single women under the age of 30 is pretty disingenuous. Our center studies this. We've done some reports on sort of the issue of choice and women being pushed out of the workforce instead of opting out or choosing to leave for children because of the hostility of workplaces to motherhood. Up there are two recent reports we've done on low-wage workers, improving the schedule effectiveness for employers around low-wage and hourly workers, and another one about caregiver discrimination against low-wage workers, particularly shocking examples of pregnancy discrimination among low-wage women workers, women still regularly being fired upon announcing their pregnancies, or actually in some cases being encouraged to get an abortion to keep their low-paid job. And also examples of mothers of color being treated worse than white mothers based on sort of the accommodations they'll get, things like that. The issue of discrimination against mothers and how it affects pay, just want to highlight 3 examples of how this can happen at work, things to think about in terms of the wage gap. An obvious way that this happens is based on stereotyping, denial of promotions and advancement, and sort of mommy tracking women once they become mothers at work. So that obviously is leading to lack of advancement. That happened in the Walmart case, I know. A second big area is the part-time wage penalty, and I know Joan was saying that part-time workers are not counted in this 77 cents, but significantly larger proportion of part-time workers are women than men in the United States. And one study showed that part-time workers make 21% less per hour than full-time workers. Another study by the Joint Economic Committee of the US Congress looked at certain industries and found that part-time workers made 58 cents to the dollar of full-time workers. This is hour per hour comparisons. And then a third pattern that results in a wage gap for mothers is unpaid time out of the workforce due to childbirth, because as I'm sure most of you know, we have very limited benefits for women when they're taking childbirth. It's mostly unpaid if you're covered by anything. If anything's paid, it's voluntary by your employer unless you happen to live in the state of California, now New Jersey and New York. But the other thing that's been studied and is pretty shocking is that time out of the workforce has disadvantages on wage earning even 20 years out after the time away from the job for the childbirth. it gets perpetuated in lower starting pay or time off, so your pay is reduced when you come back, lost seniority, lost retirement benefits, things like that, and it can perpetuate going forward. So just to let you know that we're also a resource out there. We work with plaintiffs and management side employment lawyers. We work with employers and employees and unions and policymakers. And we're really trying to provide data and resources to help when it comes to issues related to family responsibilities discrimination. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. One of the things that we wanted to do today is also give each individual person here an opportunity to really be thinking about what can I do as an individual, whether this is part of your daily job, whether you're here as someone who is interested in this issue. So I'm going to ask Ruth if you can help us answer the next question. If somebody suspects pay discrimination, what can they actually do? What are the remedies? And are there sources of information and support that we can sort of share with people? And there are also experts in the audience, and if you would like to call on any of those folks to help you answer that, that would be great.
Yes, I'm going to speak briefly about legal remedies and call on some of the experts. And my remarks are going to be brief, but I did prepare some written material that you can come up and get at the end that's much more detailed. And if you want to look at that, you can, and particularly if the lawyers want to look at it, it's up here. In order to determine if you're paid less than another person of the opposite sex, you have to know what that person is earning. And that's a huge problem. I have a daughter who's an electrical engineer, and she doesn't know what anybody else makes. And there's a culture of non-disclosure. As a matter of fact, it's not only the culture. There aren't only unwritten policies, but there's written policies as well. And in this material, there'll be, you can look at an example of a confidentiality policy, and it's written. And under the guise of confidentiality, a lot of employers prohibit you from discussing your wages or your salary. However, policies prohibiting wage disclosure and threatening discipline violate the National Labor Relations Act, and in particular, Section 8A1, since discussing wages constitutes protected concerted activity, which is activity involving two or more employees and includes the right to discuss terms and conditions of employment. Also in California, we have a labor code section, which is 232, that states that such policies, those policies that prohibit you from discussing your wages or that discharge or discipline you, are unlawful. And if you have this problem, I want to mention that I supervise the Catherine and George Alexander Community Law Center, which is a workers' rights clinic. And it's one of the clinics that Legal Aid runs, one at Hastings and one at Gold. And you can come and talk to us. Or you could file directly with the Labor Commission for the state, the Labor Code 232, or the National Labor Relations Board. And we happen to have NLRB field attorney Kathleen Schneider, who's here with us today. And she's briefly going to tell you how you would file a claim with the National Labor Relations Board.
Hi, I'm Kathleen. And if you are in your workplace and your employer tells you that you can't discuss your wages or any working conditions, or even just has a rule that's sort of overly broad, telling you you can't discuss working conditions or payroll, something like that, this rule can be in writing, this rule can be orally promulgated, please call us. I'm actually in the San Francisco office rather than in the Oakland office, and our number is 415-356-5130, and we can help you. We have an information officer available every day to help people file charges. We can't initiate investigations on our own, so we do need people to come forward and make these claims, but we would be happy to investigate them. So you can call our office, you can call Oakland. In addition, we have a website, it's www.nlrb.org. www.nlrb.gov, and you can obtain charges online and file those charges via fax or through, I think we have a way to do it by e-filing, I'm just not sure about that. And so we would be happy to investigate those type of charges. More generally, the NLRB handles discrimination on the basis of union activities, or if you have a problem with your union. So if any of those issues are yours, please feel free to call us or file a charge via fax or e-file, and we would be happy to help you.
Thank you. Yes, and you do not have to be in a union to file this particular charge, the concerted activity charge. And I want to mention on the last page of your program, there is the contact information for all these organizations. I noticed that we also have Deputy Labor Commissioner Joan Healy here today, and she's going to briefly explain how to file a claim with the Labor Commission.
Contrary to many of the panel members, we're here in San Jose. We're 2 blocks away from campus, right on the San Antonio walkway. So we're in the State Building. It's near 3rd and between San Carlos and San Fernando. So the State Labor Commissioner's Office, we're best known for taking complaints when people feel they haven't been paid properly, their hourly or overtime rate. That's kind of our elephant in the living room. However, we do take retaliation complaints. So if you suffer this kind of problem at work where you suffer an adverse action, either your hours are reduced or you get a write-up in your personnel file, something like that, you can file a complaint about that. As with every statute, there's a time limit. You have to file within 6 months of the date of the adverse action. The forms are available online, and if you look at that back page in the manual there, our website address is www.dir.ca.gov, and then there's a /DLSC. One of the things I like working about our agency is we're really transparent. We even have our enforcement manual available online, and the forms are all there. I'll also leave some of my business cards with Ruth, so if anybody wants to contact me directly, you can do that as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd also like to mention that it's 6 months for filing with the NLRB as well. Okay, I'm next going to talk about sex-based wage discrimination. And there's a federal EPA, Equal Pay Act, as many of you know. We also have a state one in California. I'm going to talk first about the federal Equal Pay Act. The employee has to show that he or she was paid lower wages than a person of the opposite sex, and it has to be at the same establishment, they call it, the workplace, that's performing substantially equal work on a job requiring equal skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions. The remedies for the equal pay violation aren't all that great. All you get is back pay. You also get what's called liquidated damages, which is basically doubling the back pay. So you get that. So a lot of times people bring these claims under Title VII as well. And Title VII is a general discrimination statute. It says that the employer can't discriminate against anyone in employment, and that includes hiring, firing, promotion, and wage inequality on the basis it's not just sex or gender, it's race, color, religion, and national origin. There's differences between the EPA and Title VII. Title VII, you get much more damages. And for Title VII, though, you have to have 15 employees. There's no minimum for the EPA. And under Title VII, it doesn't have to be equal work. So if it's a one-of-a-kind job that a woman is doing, but the employer, if they hired a male, they would have paid more, the woman can bring the claim. Or if women have to pay more for their pensions, they can bring the claim. And employees often file both claims. The EPA claims have to be filed within 2 years if it's non-willful, 3 years if it's willful. And the EEOC for Title VII, you have to file within 300 days. We have Dana Johnson here today from the EEOC in San Jose, and she's going to talk briefly about the procedure. And I just want to mention, for EPA claims, you do not have to file with a government agency. You can go straight to court. With the Title VII ones, you do have to file.
Hi, thank you. I'm Dana Johnson, and if anybody feels that they're being discriminated against in wages because of their gender, or you know somebody, they can come to either our San Francisco district office, or we have an office in San Jose that's also very close by. It's, well, there's an address on the back of the material, but it's just a few blocks from here over on 3rd Street. Our offices are open all days of the week, but if people want to come in and file a charge, the best days to come in are Tuesdays and Thursdays between 8 and 2. On those days, we take intake, and we have investigators who can sit down and speak with anybody who thinks that they want to file a charge, and discuss the jurisdictional issues, gather the information, and help them with the filing of the charge. People can also send in charges by mail, and a charge doesn't have to be on any particular form. It can be on a napkin if people want. It just needs to contain certain information, the employee, who the employer is, when the discrimination took place, and what kind of discrimination. It has to be signed and dated, and it has to indicate that they want the EEOC to take some action, and that for us is a charge. So like I said, we'll take napkins or whatever. We do have a questionnaire form that's available on our